I was reading some comments on Amazon for a book that talked about a fairly common perception in the New Age movement, which is that on some level we choose the experiences that we have, which I think that is a very empowering perspective, but I also understand the problem that some people have with that perspective. The idea that ultimately, on the level of spirit, there are no victims. Because when we look in the world, we see many people that are victimized. And so it's really hard, I think, to come to a place of peace with this concept that there are no victims without understanding it on a deeper level. For example, if you look at abused children, then it is very hard to say, well, they are not victimized by their parents. But what this concept of there are no victims means is that on the level of spirit, we all have certain lessons to be learned. And think about it. Let's say there's somebody from somebody who lived in the early 1900s who grew up and became a Nazi and was responsible for the deaths of thousands of people, and then they were killed by a Russian soldier. Now, when that person is born again, karmically, it makes sense on a certain level that they're going to have experiences that develop empathy. So experiencing some kind of pain inflicted upon you would make sense if there's some kind of lesson to be learned on that deeper level of empathy. Because if you hurt other people, then experiencing hurt can help you understand it. And I believe that's how this cycle works, and that when we learn empathy, we burn off karma, and when we stop creating situations in which we're hurting others, then we don't experience hurt ourselves in this lifetime or future lifetimes, and that's how the species as a whole evolves. But if somebody is, hurt, if they're abused or attacked or whatever, then I believe that what they need is empathy, first of all, not this deeper lesson that they're not going to be able to understand while they're in a state of shock and PTSD. In other words, if somebody has just been assaulted and you're trying to tell them that they co-created that situation, it is not going to be well timed, because people first need to know that they're okay, that there's still a reason to be here. They need to settle down in their mind and body and get to a point where they can feel centered. Now, if they don't eventually get to the point where there's an understanding of why something like that could have happened, then there can be the feeling of walking around always feeling as though the rug is going to be yanked out from underneath them. Something bad could happen at any moment, at any moment. And a lot of people have that perception, even in the spiritual realm of teachers and so forth, that you could die at any moment and you never know what's going to happen. And I don't carry that with me myself. I don't find that a useful perception, because I believe that death and other things that are horrible, we perceive them as horrible, they make sense. They may not make sense at the time, but they always, in my belief system, seem to make sense as to why things happen. It's about breaking down our armor, experiencing different challenging events so that we can better understand ourselves. Because in the level of spirit, there is complete empathy, which is why there's no violence or ego. Spirit doesn't deal with all the things that we deal with. But look at what we have to overcome. Our form, our biological programming came from an animal state, which is all about fight or flight, survival of the fittest, attack everyone except your own offspring, pretty much. And just, that's a lot to overcome. So to bring spirit into this world means to allow for greater empathy. And it makes sense to me that empathy is built through understanding when we hurt another, then we are hurting ourselves ultimately, because we will experience some form of hurt when we hurt another if we don't develop empathy about why we have to let others be without influencing, controlling, manipulating physically or psychologically or on any level, causing harm to another. So in my lifetime, for example, before I was into spirituality and before I was into interconnectedness, I believed that what people didn't know didn't hurt them. And so there was times in relationships where I had affairs and, was deceptive. And later on, that came back in this life to for me to experience being deceived, so that I could have a deeper empathy, not only intellectually knowing that it's wrong to deceive others, but understanding how it affects the psychology, emotions, and the body of a person who's being deceived. And that is the way karma plays itself out. So, am I victimized when I'm deceived? It feels that way, but ultimately, in moving through the grief of that pain, I can get to the place where, with anything that I've experienced that has felt yucky, that I needed to learn something from the experience and can accept it and grow from that. That doesn't mean I resubject myself to the various people in my life that I feel have a kind of, chronic tendency towards creating, certain kind of dramatic situations and so forth that feel uncomfortable. But it's still a growth process that comes from accepting that all of our experiences are part of our growth, and that if we just look at this life, that can be confusing, like, how can a little child, deserve this abuse? But if it's part of their karma that comes from other lives, then maybe it's all, makes a little more sense. And that, if somebody in a certain life is hurting other people or killing other people, raping and abusing and all these things like that, it wouldn't be that illogical for them to manifest in another situation, either in that lifetime or another lifetime, in which they feel what it's like to receive hurt in a way that they dished it out. The more we experience pain, suffering in various forms, the less likely we are to inflict it upon others. And that's how empathy grows. And the more empathy we have, the more our experience in this physical form is reflective of that which occurs in the spirit form, which is pure empathy and pure interconnectedness.